Hey folks, good afternoon. Dustin Siggins with Proven Media Solutions. Welcome to another episode of Cracking the Comms Code. Today we have Julie with Sage Communications, we have Drew with Four Corners, and we have Dennis, who is kind of triple acting here. He's dad and grandpa in my household. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he is also my business partner at Proven Media Solutions. And today we're going to talk about why PR and marketing and branding should not go away during tough times, whether they are a recession, whether they are the crisis facing lettuce right now because of illnesses, why, and not just why they shouldn't go away, because we all know that, we're all communications people, but also how do we make the case for continued team building, budget, and authority during those tough times. So, Julie, Drew, Dennis, if you can just briefly introduce yourselves, we'll kick things off.
Sounds great. Well,
Go
go.
ahead, Julie. Go ahead, Julie.
Okay. My name is Julie Murphy, president of Sage Communications. We're a full service PR and marketing firm. We're located just outside Washington, D.C. and Tyson's Corner. And we work primarily with technology companies and government contractors, so B2B and B2G. And so that will be a lot of my sort of lens today as I look at tough times and what to do in communicating during them. And I'll pass it to you, Drew.
Hi, my name is Drew Kerr. I am based in New York City. I'm an executive communications trainer specifically for the tech and Web3 industries. Before doing that, I have a long time communications consultant and ran a PR firm. I do operate globally. I actually travel quite a bit, and happy to be here.
My name is Dennis Siggins. I'm the father of one of my business partners, Dustin Siggins. I live on Cape Cod. Been self-employed my whole life. Most recently, the last 12, 13 years, um, with the assistance of another business partner of mine, Andy Brennan, we've built the largest gutter installation, gutter cleaning, and gutter maintenance company in the Northeast. We currently have 7 locations, mostly in Massachusetts and one in a neighboring state. And that's who I am.
So, this is a topic that I was raised on, is when times are tough, you always invest in marketing and branding. And Julie, you mentioned in one of our one-on-ones a couple weeks back that you had seen not a recession, but chaos in last year in the government contracting sector. And then when I reached out to Drew, he said, "Oh, Dustin, there are so many corporate examples of companies changing what they're doing during a crisis, during a recession." So I do want to just kick things off this way is by sharing my screen and showing something that I think Drew had mentioned in our prep call was that in the early 90s, McDonald's cut its advertising budget while two of its competitors, Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, increased their marketing budgets, their advertising budgets. And the numbers were pretty clear. Pizza Hut increased sales by 61%, Taco Bell increased sales by 40, and McDonald's sales decreased by 28%. This was all during a recession. This was a war in the Middle East and a bad real estate market. And so, Drew, I'd like to kick over to you because you have a really good example from Toyota that I think would really help set the stage. And then, Julie, I'd like to go to you to talk about not a recession, but chaos, not a crisis, but chaos.
Mhm.
And then, Dennis, I'd like to go to you because you have a really good example from during the pandemic on how you took advantage of when your competitors were pulling back.
Hi, sure. So I always bring up this story because um, it almost kind of goes against the grain, or certainly it was something that was very different from the way many companies and many marketers were thinking at the time. Um, in 2009, 2010, Toyota, which had a reputation for safety and reliability, all of a sudden had to do a massive, massive recall because of unintended acceleration. People would put their foot on the brake, sometimes barely touching it, and vehicles would accelerate. There would be accidents. It's something that actually started in San Diego with one vehicle in San Diego, and then just it reports everywhere. It became so bad. Toyota, as I said, they had to recall 9 million vehicles, and the chairman of Toyota, he was the grandson of the founder, under a lot of pressure, had to even appear in front of Congress, fly from Japan to DC and testify. So it was the worst of the worst. And, factories were stopped briefly. There was a lot going on. And under any other circumstances, with a lot of other companies, they just would have gone under the radar because it was so bad. I mean, Toyota became such a brand that was synonymous with, problems and issues with manufacturing and cars and things going wrong that they, a normal company, many companies would have just stopped and just tried to go into hiding. But Toyota instead kept advertising, kept marketing. As a matter of fact, it just came out with its Prius, which was not affected by this unintended acceleration. So they just put a lot of money into pushing their Prius car, which obviously is not gasoline, but they shifted their advertising for all their other vehicles to emphasize transparency and safety and just to keep reassuring their customers. They did not miss beat. They adjusted, just as all good companies should, but they did not stop. And they've become this classic case of why you should not go under the radar, even if you're hit. It's something as bad as this massive, shameful, really, recall.
Chaos in GovCon, and as you corrected me on our prep call, it was not a recession, even though people treated it like such. It was just a lot of other things that were sort of this perfect storm.
Yeah, so last year, which I'm sure many people watching the news cycle saw, that when a new administration came in last year, there was a lot of change in direction really fast. And sometimes things don't move so fast in government. So I think it was just a lot all at once. And so it doesn't even necessarily need to be a crisis case like what Drew was talking about, which is a great example. It's critical to stay visible, especially during a crisis. But it can also just be a time of great change. And what happens during a time of uncertainty is all of your key stakeholders need and want information. Your customers, your employees, they want to know what's going on. And so the natural sort of human reaction as executives is, let's not say anything until it's perfect. We're uncertain of what's going on, so let's go under the radar. And the challenge of that is there's a lot of unintended consequences by going dark, right? And so that can maybe make your employees or customers think, they're incompetent, they're not evolving, are they paying attention? There's a lot of fear, all of these things. And so I'm not saying or recommending that you need to communicate in the same way as, business as usual, but you do need to communicate within context to instill that trust. And so a lot of what we were doing with our clients, we were saying, listen, it's not black and white. You don't have to jump into these political landmines. You don't have to get into the political conversation at all. You're a service provider helping the government meet its missions. Talk about your areas of expertise. Do low risk sort of opportunities to continue getting your name out there. So if you're a cybersecurity provider, you can still do contributed content around cybersecurity because that's an important mission no matter who is in office. And so there are many things that you can do to showcase stability, but it did take a little bit of convincing with some of our clients who sort of wanted to let's wait and see what happens when, again, you don't have to stick your neck out there, but you do need to, keep a baseline. And it's an opportunity because many companies are going sort of more silent, and it's an opportunity for you to still be visible among your key audiences. So.
And Dad, I think you had described that you had done exactly what Julie's describing to take market share during the pandemic.
Yeah, boy, we'd come back from vacation, my office team and I, the very beginning of March of 2020, and my son Dustin here had a baby that was coming along. We got home on the 12th. Remember that? We got home on the 12th of March,
Yep,
and Annalise was born on the 14th.
that's right.
And
Yep,
Mom had to fly down, and
yep.
when she got there, she couldn't get a plane home because all the airlines started shutting down one by one. And I thought I was going to have to drive down to Virginia and pick her up, which is about 10 hours from Cape Cod. But about 2 weeks later, it was March 23rd, COVID was building. I would call it coronavirus. It was building. We didn't know what it was. People were scared. And I rely heavily. I'm in the home service business here on Cape Cod and now in all over Massachusetts. And at the time, we had one location. It was on Cape Cod, and I rely heavily on radio advertising because I have an older clientele, 50 to 85, and they listen heavily to terrestrial radio. I was in one of my radio stations making a couple of ads, and it was March 23rd, and the governor of the state of Massachusetts effectively shut down the state of Massachusetts that day. It was March 23rd. We didn't have to shut down because we work outdoors and we're also considered essential, but our customers were scared. People were freaking out. Nobody knew what was going on. And when I came out of this radio session, the owner and the general manager of a group of 4 radio stations that I was working with, they called me into a meeting. They had their whole staff in there, and they were basically telling their staff, a lot of you are going to get laid off. Things aren't going well. The governor just shut down the state, and it was March 23rd, and April 1st is the start of their advertising season for the summer on Cape Cod. All the restaurants hold their advertising, and that's a third of their advertising right there. And the next big group is the automobile industry, which is very, very heavily involved in radio ads and TV ads. They pulled their advertising, and several other small groups pulled their advertising. They lost about 75 to 80% of their advertising revenue that day. And I had just come out of a session where I made a few commercials with one of my sidekicks, and we were sitting in this meeting, and I commented a little bit, but mostly I didn't. I listened. When I got back to my office, I gave it some thought. I made a few phone calls, and I contacted all of my radio stations. At the time, I was on about 10 or 12 radio stations in and around Cape Cod and a little bit over the bridge up toward Boston. And they were all in panic mode. So at the time, I was probably spending $10,000 a month. And so I cut a deal with every radio station that they would double my radio footprint, and they were only going to charge me 15%. So those 10 or 12 stations I was on, spending 10 grand at the time, I now was able to spend $20,000. But the second 10,000 only cost me $1,500. So I really did double my radio footprint for 15% of what it should have cost me. But I didn't sign 1-year contracts with them, which is what I usually do. I signed 3-year contracts with all 12 radio stations. So I basically doubled my advertising footprint for 15% more than half of it. And I signed 3-year contracts, and those contracts carried me through all of 20, 21, 22, and into the beginning of April of 23. It was a great time for us because I maybe have 7, 8 competitors on Cape Cod. I would say half of them went under during COVID. And the remaining 4 of us, we were the 4 that survived. But I know all those other 4 or 5, and they couldn't even get product. They couldn't even get material. All of my competitors are 1, 2, or 3-man shops. We're a 25, maybe 27-person company in our corporate location. We have 6 other locations, but out of our corporate location here on Cape Cod, we were probably maybe 18 to 20 people at the time. We weren't as large as we are now, but we were the only one who could get product because we had extra trucks. We were sending our trucks all over the Northeast, Perth Amboy, New Jersey, from Cape Cod. So we had the capacity to add marketing to our platform, and we had the capacity to act on that. And it was a time of great growth for us when half of my competitors went under.
And so, Julie, with something Dad just said is very interesting. Communications people often think through just our communications lens. And something that I've been advocating for on the show and in my writing and on LinkedIn is we have to have a business understanding. And so I'd like you to riff on what he didn't just say, oh, we doubled our marketing for 15%. He also talked about capacity. And so as an agency, what I think you said, I think you've told me 40 employees and 10 or 15 contractors. It's a sizable agency. How do you make sure that your client managers and your team is thinking through just beyond the communications lens so you can really add that value?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, just for some more context. So, we work with a lot of very large brand name tech companies, but a lot of times we're working with just their public sector teams. And a lot of times they have big
Oh,
corporate global agencies. And the reason why they hire us is because we understand this market. And so, a lot of times it's interesting because a lot of times we're hired by the sales leader. It's not even always by the marketing.
really?
Yeah, it's not always by the marketing or communication. I mean, we also obviously have relationships with them, but a big reason, some of our biggest fans are the sales leaders that say they go beyond. They do communications in a way that is truly sales enablement. And separately, Dustin, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I actually co-host a podcast called Marketing and Selling Effectiveness, and it's all about what you're
I
talking
didn't
about,
know
breaking
that.
down the
Oh,
silos
I didn't know
between
that.
marketing and sales. Because if communications is not leading to better business outcomes, what's the point? We're not just doing it to get famous, we're doing it to
Right.
lead to better outcomes. And so, what Dennis was talking about is using it as an opportunity to significantly invest and expand market share. And he saw that as an opportunity, particularly when the radio lost so many of its advertisers. He saw it as an opportunity to really expand. Another similar instance that you could look at is, we were just talking with Drew's image in the Great Recession of 2007, 2008. Interestingly, that was the same time that Uber and Airbnb were
Yes.
founded. And the reason for that is sometimes recessions actually create conditions that wouldn't exist otherwise. And so when everyone else is playing defense, if you can really think strategically, both from a comm, sales, and business standpoint, and think a little bit on offense, it actually drives some of the biggest opportunities if you look back in the history of recessions.
I would say, Julie, you said sometimes a recession like or a market crash like '08 will create opportunities. I would say every single time something like that happens, huge opportunities occur. I've always been criticized by people around me, and '08 was nothing new. I wasn't wealthy. Um, my financial portfolio probably lost six, seven, 800,000 in a 1 month period in '08. And we owned a couple of properties at the time. My wife and I have owned and flipped a lot of properties, and we were planning on retiring down to Cape Cod. We already had a home here anyway, and we lived about 4 hours north up in the White Mountains. So we sold our house and we sold another property, the last of our investments that we had. We sold them and we moved to Cape Cod. And the house that we lived in, it was a big, very large, beautiful home. We built it. It was one of our homes. And I bet we sold it at 65% of its previous value.
Oh, yeah.
And right,
Oh, yeah.
right. But and I was criticized a little bit by certain family members that um, like to criticize me, and I dropped that all into mutual funds, and the whole mutual fund pool was sitting at about like 38 to 40% of what it once was and what it would become again. And so, yeah, I took a little bit of hit on the house and another property, but it all went into mutual funds, and we purchased them at about 40 cents on the dollar. So I call that a win. I call that another wonderful opportunity to turn a loss in real estate into a future gain in mutual funds, which are simple. Mutual funds don't take any brains. And there's great family wealth to be built in mutual funds alone. So yeah, that's just one small example of a wonderful opportunity that's available to everyone.
Drew, give us anything. Want to hop in?
I was going to say that I was thinking about Michael Citrick's book, Spin, which is long out of print. And I know you've heard me mention that book. Julie, I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
that,
I am. Yeah, it's a classic.
which is long out of print, but still incredibly relevant. And there's one, he has these laws of spin. And one of them is very relevant to this conversation, which is if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. And it might not be the way you want it to be told. So when you're pulling back on your marketing or your PR or things like that and those opportunities, um, I mean, McDonald's is the perfect example of, how you started it. That's when everybody jumps in. And it is the same, and I'm not quite sure if, people who, are looking at cutting marketing because it's so easy or PR, we are experiencing a lot of upheaval right now, with a lot of mergers of these huge public entities who are combining, and some of these companies are going away in these mergers and a lot of people being laid off. Who's going to jump in that gap when those stories are not being told?
And two, there was something you said, Drew, about the opportunity, and I'm spacing on it, but I'll come back to it. Julie, you look like you want to say something. Sorry.
Oh, do you know what I was thinking is that communications continue to evolve. We know this, right? Especially younger generations. Authenticity is really important, and people naturally don't trust large institutions as well as they used to. That's why they're going to Yelp reviews instead of always believing advertising. And so I just think that I've even noticed it because I hire a lot of junior employees who are right out of college and we train them, and it's a big part of our business model, and I love working with the younger generations. I do notice that there's a difference where um, the culture is different. There's a lot more updating. There's a lot more. I mean, it used to be sort of like senior executives would make decisions and that would be that. But now everyone wants to be in the know. And it's actually very healthy for a business culture to be that way. And I only say that because I think just to double down on when there is either a crisis or a recession or massive change in your industry, people are more interested in, they want more information, not less, and how important it is as a leader to show up in those moments. And it's okay if you say, listen, I don't have all the answers, but we're paying attention. And these are the moves we're making. And I'm going to keep you posted every step of the way. It's the same principles of crisis. You don't have to have all the answers, but you can't go completely silent. And I just think authenticity and transparency are huge in today's world, with brand equity, because as soon as you lose that, you go down the tubes pretty quickly. And so just another plug for a reason why communications has become so important, and you're seeing more, not just CMOs, but chief communications officers at these big companies.
I think the people, the entities, the departments, the agencies that will continue to succeed and persist are the ones that understand how to convey the value that they deliver. And that's really what it's all about. In all this time where there's all these mergers and all these um, efficiencies going on, everybody's going to be looking at where can I get the most value. And so if to survive and think about the long run and not, and to dodge a bullet, basically, one has to prove that you can work within these circumstances. Budgets are being cut. There's no question. I mean, you've got a lot of people who have been laid off because of these mega mergers and companies that are being literally folded into others. Obviously, this offers a lot of opportunity for those people who are departing, but it's those who understand how to convey value and what they can do that will succeed. And you don't have to have, I mean, I know we talked about this earlier, I was thinking in terms of films. So today you have The Odyssey opening up. $250 million budget, doesn't include marketing or anything like that. And then you've got Obsession, the horror film, which about a month opened up a month or so ago, and it only cost $750,000, $1 million to make. And that's already on its way to making triple the cost of the Odyssey's budget. It's on its way to making, $1 billion, very close to it. So what can you do for the budget? Do you need that kind of money? Where are the ideas? Creativity becomes at a premium. Not only the relationships that we have with the media, but I would say that there's probably now more of a premium on creativity because that is the value, that's the gold in public relations and marketing than ever before, because that's where the value will travel and mean a lot to clients and customers.
Talk about value, right? Drew, would you mind going on mute? Which is at the background echo. When we talk about value, there's always that value is the eye of the beholder. And so again, Dennis is my business partner. Has always been in the commodity space, sports marketing, innkeeping, roofing, gutter cleaning now. And when I've shared with him some of the things I say on LinkedIn, he goes, "All you communications people just talk the same way. Like, get right to the point." And so Dad, I'd like you to contribute here and kind of talk through what are the things that you as a business owner, right? We've talked a little bit about your marketing skills and your marketing knowledge and opportunities that you see, but as someone who has worked with marketing agencies and the like in the past, what are the things that we, whether a consultant or running an agency, need to think through when we're thinking about the pain point of a business owner?
One of my franchisees, he's a good guy. His sales sometimes can be high, sometimes low. He hasn't found that level ground yet, and he hasn't found that steady growth. He's growing every year. He grows, but he tends to sometimes have a knee-jerk reaction to a bad month or two. And one of the things I've been trying to impress upon him for some time now is don't call me when you're going down in flames.
Yes.
Call me every month. Call me every week. But don't ever let a month go by where you and I don't call and have a conversation. You tell me how it's going on. And we finally come around to that point this year. We talk once or twice a month. We've bolstered what he was doing, but he's in panic mode. He tends to overreact or at least knee-jerk react to a lot of things. And oftentimes he blames everything on marketing or lack of or mismarketing or something like that. But I don't, and he wants to change marketing. He wants to make changes constantly, continuously, and react to every monthly upswing or downturn. I believe in branding versus marketing versus advertising. Advertising to me is the entry level. The only thing lower than advertising is not advertising and depending on word of mouth.
Right.
But we market for three reasons. Number one, we want the phone to ring. That way we bring in clients and customers who come in with their checkbooks and we make money. So the number one reason for marketing is to bring in customers that make money. The second reason we market is to remind our existing customers that we're still in business and we're still here to service you in any and every way that we can, as we have in the past. And the third, and oftentimes completely unknown reason that I like to market, or in this case, brand, is most of my companies have always been the biggest in their region. And so I want to use my marketing budget as a bully to let anybody know that if you want to come into this space, you can't afford it. You can't afford to swim in these waters. They're too deep and it's too expensive to do this. And you should go find somewhere else to run your business. I don't mean to sound arrogant, but it's a huge part of the process. And I'm going to say I spend 1/3 of my advertising budget on each. I just don't know which 1/3 goes to where. I think it's so essential to always be out there and constantly examine and re-examine your marketing and your branding budget. And eventually, where I'm at now, I'm 12 years into my final business in my life. And I don't have to put that much time into marketing anymore. I know it so well, and I have so many people around me in the right places. I can run this very, very large and strong marketing budget on 30 minutes a month. And that's a huge part of the type of branding program that I've built is eventually it becomes very, very low maintenance. Um, but you always have to be out there. You can't underreact or overreact to market trends, to economic activity, economic crashes, who gets elected, who doesn't get elected. You just got to be out there running your business. And for me, it all begins with marketing, making that phone ring.
I have a couple of thoughts actually based on what Dennis just said. You made a couple of really good points. One of them that you just made, and what you're talking about is sort of being like the biggest shark, the deepest water is like it is in terms of other competitors coming in. What you're doing there is creating a perception that you're the company to beat. And even when times are down, you're still the expert and you're still the one that everyone's looking after. And people want to buy from experts. They want to work with experts. They want to work with people they trust. And so what you're talking about is through that branding and advertising, you're creating this aura, this perception of being the best, whether times are good or bad. And so that is, to me, one of the biggest benefits that you're talking about. The other thing that you mentioned that I thought was interesting when you first started talking was that when you have some conversations with a business partner who is, you know, maybe not always calm, or something happens, you switch directions. Maybe something we should have talked about at the beginning, certainly in terms of crisis, like it is really hard to make decisions, even business decisions, when everyone is really emotionally charged. And it's why Drew and myself, like, we're always advising our clients to have a crisis communications plan in place before anything happens. And so there are a lot of these things you can hypothesize. The market goes down, you lose a major customer, you have a client that is being sued. I don't know. There's such a wide range of crises that can happen. There's a lot of these scenarios that you can really sort of think about in advance so that when tough times do hit, yes, every situation is unique and it has to be customized, but you have general sort of best practices. You know what you need to do in order to come out on top. And so that planning in advance is really important too.
Regarding something that you just said, Julie, okay. Branding. Branding is what the cowboys used to do to their cows. They would stick a hot iron on their fanny, and then you've got a permanently scarred brand. That's what we want to do to our customer's brain. We want to brand our name, our image, our logo on their brain so that they're not Google searching, in my case, for somebody to install gutters on their home. They're looking for the Cape Cod gutter monkeys. So I don't even rate on Google search. I don't even rate because I don't spend money on that. And a lot of my customers do. I got 8 customers. I mean, eight competitors, all fighting for that little dot of Google space. And I am thoroughly branded in the 50 to 80-year-old market. They're the people that have all the money. And most of those 60 to 80-year-old people are not Google searching. They're looking for us because we live on their morning radio show every morning when they wake up and have coffee. Now, with branding, a lot of my franchisees are still small and growing. So they want to brand themselves. They want to create the image of we are a bigger company than we really are. We're really not, 3 trucks and 7 guys. We're a much bigger operator. They're trying to create that image. We're bigger than you think we are, or we're bigger than we really are. And they want you to think that. We're the opposite, the Cape Cod Gutter Monkeys. We're a medium-sized company, which is huge for my industry. So what we've done is we really try to present the image that we're smaller than we are. So that when you call here, if you want to talk to the owner, well, he's right here. He's in here. Do you want to talk to him? We use this method in our radio advertising. We're very immature in our radio advertising. We're goofy, we're silly, we're stupid. People love it. They really do. I've never ever made a serious. Now I have one radio commercial that's actually serious. My TV commercials, my radio commercial, they're all rather goofy and silly. But it gives the impression, and it's my voice all the time. And they know that this voice has been on the radio now for 12 plus or minus years. And we use this to create the impression that we're smaller than we are. So sometimes you're a growing company and you want to create an image that you're bigger than you are. And then you get to the point where you don't. You want the public to know that, yeah, we're still local. The owner's still in-house. Yeah. And we put together radio advertising that lets the people know that, our employees, we don't 1099 anyone. We don't use temp labor. We don't use seasonal work. We're all full-time Cape Cod Gutter Monkey employees. We live here on the Cape, and we do stuff like this. And so I think that that's the image we're trying to portray, and everybody's at a different place. So.
Hey, Drew, I want to redirect to you because we've, I think, gone a little away from the topic of during tough times, but one thing that Dennis just talked about is positioning yourself however it needs to be happening. So when a company, for example, is going through an executive leadership change, whether it's the CEO or someone else on the C-suite, that can be a time of disruption. That can be a time when the CEO may bring their own agency in, or they have a different idea of how to market or brand the company. How do you ensure your clients, the voice is changing, but the brand is not? How do you make sure that that is continuous?
I think that when there's a handoff, and that really is what it is, it's a handoff and a change of leadership. The first thing is you want to make sure that whoever is initially, the new CEO, and when they are first speaking, because they are not predictors, they're not psychics. Very often reporters want to know what's going to happen. What's going to happen 3 months from now? What's going to happen 6 months from now? What statistics do you see? They want promises. And one thing I've discovered for a long time is it is very dangerous to make promises, especially when you are first, taking the top position. You don't want to make the only promise you want to make is, I'll be accountable. That's maybe what people would want to hear because the employees are going to want to hear that and they want to see there's a steady ship. But to promise sales or something with the company where we're gonna look at that policy and you can't. We've seen so many of these interviews where people always they're asked these impossible questions when they first take office, and there's no way they can answer those questions. And anything they say is on the record. So if it doesn't happen 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, it backfires. It's brought up. Well, you said this in your interview in January, and here it is in October, and that hasn't. very, very dangerous game to play. So the most important thing is that there has to be a conveyance of confidence, of presence, of belief, you know, and that I'm here, I'm rolling up my sleeves, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And, you know, I don't want to, and you could even say, be almost semi-transparent and say, I can't make promises now because this is something that takes some time. I mean, if you think about when Starbucks took the CEO of Chipotle, which was probably one of the biggest,
Massive.
you know,
Yes.
top classic, extremely high profile. And I believe his name is Brian Nichols, the fellow they took from Chipotle. Brian Nichols dodged every single question. It was all about, I believe in Starbucks. Starbucks is a great brand. We'll look at it was almost sort of like a treading water slash positive spin on it because you can't get caught up in the promise game. You just want people to feel confident in your abilities and confident, not only externally, but internally at the same time. You're dealing with multiple audiences. And then once you get through that little gauntlet at the beginning, and you could decide, there's only so many times you can kind of swim that race of when you first start, then it's time to get down to business and do what you need to do. So that when it's the right time to make announcements of change or new policies or things like that. I mean, I think Brian Nichols did a great job with that, as far as knowing what to say, what
Right.
not to say.
Yep.
Exactly. He knew when to put his head up and speak up and say, here's the story, here's what the thing is. And people now, I mean, the fact is that Starbucks seems to be turning around under him. Things have become more favorably. And they didn't have a yardstick of promises to go back on from when he first said, when he first took the job. It's all about, I'm here, I believe in it, they believe in me, I believe in everybody who works here, and let's get to work. And that's all you can say. That's all you can say. Keep the faith, really. Keep the faith.
Right. And Julie, I want to go to you in a moment. We kind of talked about three things that I think I'll dial in together here. And one is Dennis mentioned consistency. Drew, you talk about not overpromising. And I think that two, Dad, you said you spend very little effort on your marketing and branding, and I believe it. One thing that we talk about in PR, of course, is earned media. When you're not pitching people anymore, the media is calling your client because you've been out there long enough that you're still producing the same results for either less effort or better results for the same effort. So on our website, Proven Media Solutions, we have our good faith pledge. That is our process promise to our clients. And the first guarantee here on our guarantees page is no one can guarantee the press. No one can guarantee press coverage. But we guarantee a process here that is designed to get results in a certain amount of time. It is also designed to be, frankly, a headache for our clients the first 4 weeks so that the next 11 months are smooth sailing. So that we can create the opportunities, we can create that consistency, but also so if something does happen, they trust our recommendation. So, Julie, I'd like you to discuss how you dial into that with your clients on how you work with them, earning their trust, not over promising and yet ensuring that you get to the point where they're putting very little effort in, but there's a high outcome and high result from the effort.
Yeah. And I love your pledge there. And I hadn't seen that before, but our process is actually pretty similar. It's about, and it goes back to authenticity and transparency, which I think is so important in today's world. Because what you didn't just say, which I've heard a lot of people say, hey, if you want guaranteed coverage, buy an ad. I mean,
Right,
that's
right,
like a
right.
long time saying in the PR world, right? But we do the same thing you do. We tell exactly what our process is, like, what the media etiquette is, what's news and what's not. We're going to take you every step of the way. We're going to do media training to make sure once we secure that opportunity for you, we close it as best we can. We're giving you the sound bites. We're telling you how to respond, helping prep you into responding to these questions so the media find it valuable. So We do a very similar process to you do there. The other thing that we do to try to really help gain our clients' trust is, again, because we have this niche expertise, is that we can really service their arms and legs. So we prove that to them. You know, we're news junkies. We're following exactly what's going on the Hill and how it's going to impact funding in certain categories, which means how it's going to impact your business. So we're constantly flagging things to them. And hopefully the first to flag to them, you know, as soon as it hits, like this is on the radar. Sometimes you might want to comment on it publicly. Sometimes it's more just FYI, so it's within your awareness. But to me, it's back to what Drew was saying in terms of showing your value so there's a true outcome. That's how you build trust over time.
Go ahead, Drew.
You have to, you know, you don't have to be an odyssey to do an obsession. You don't have to work on that budget if you can prove your value with a great idea and execute it. And I think that's the most important thing in these times where there's mergers and people are getting laid off and there's just this examination of the bottom line. Again, it is all about value. What can we deliver and how can we show we can deliver on whatever budget that we're given? That's why it's important to be creative. That's why it's important to think what can we do to get the most mileage that will accomplish that goal for our client, and they will see us as a cost efficient, way of getting their message across, without, going outside the budget and, doing something crazy.
Or even
And I
creative.
think,
I'm sorry,
you
Drew.
know, I was going to say that, with a lot of people being laid off in the process with these mergers, I would think that a lot of them are going to go on their own, as what has happened in the tech industry and a lot of other industries. We're sort of generating this waves and waves of entrepreneurs who are doing things their way and have rethinking it and have learned from the companies they work for how they want to do it, whether they want to follow that way or do things their way differently. I don't want to do that. That doesn't work for me. And what I'm hoping is that as we see these people, new agencies, and however they form, whether they be working with influencers, which is another thing that has filled in the gap, and um, however they manifest themselves, that they explain they've learned probably better than anybody that they have to prove their value to be considered and dodge any kind of budgeting bullet.
And to your point, Drew, one of the things that I was really nervous when I started my company, I had been let go from a job. My first kid was about to be born, and Dad said to me, "How much do you do in a year freelancing right now?" And I told him, and he said, "You have a business card, a website, and a tagline." I said, None of those." And he goes, "Great. Let's get that going. You're going to triple business in a few months." And he was right. We actually quadrupled business. Getting the website got us a significant contract because it showed that we were trustworthy. And the website was garbage. Our website now is very basic, but I got really nervous because everyone in comm seems to have these snazzy, decks. I call them PowerPoints. Everyone else calls them a deck. All these different phraseologies. And one of the things I've learned or become comfortable with in the last 2 years is our brand is fairly simple. Our website is basic. Our proposals and our contracts are a PDF. The brightest thing is our logo at the top. We don't take 3 pages to get bragging about ourselves and our services. We just come out and we can put a proposal together that's 50,000 or 500,000 on one page. We do not waste people's time. And I think to your point, Drew, that's the most expensive thing in a tough time is that CEO or that CMO, that CCO needs to know that I don't have to worry about you. And they'll give you more budget with that. Whether it's we're talking to a current client that they've lost a senior VP. So an organization that's gone from a couple million a year to about 7 in the last decade, they want to get to 10 in the next 2 years. That there's major disruption going on, and it's a massive opportunity for us as long as we can show that we're not going to waste their time.
The thing is just like any public or private company, you have values, you have laws, you have rules, you have a culture, and that's part of it. Um, you don't have to obviously have a fancy website. Companies would certainly appreciate it because bottom line is, in the end, they're not hiring your website, they're hiring you, and they're hiring what you represent, your capabilities, and how you and your staff think
Yes.
and execute.
Yep.
That's what it is how you think. They probably may never look at your website again. After
Right.
you initially have a conversation, they may never look at it again. But in the end, to make it through, whether it be economic time, difficult times, reconsiderations, change at the top, changing of the guard, etc., it is you and what you deliver and what you're like and the way you think. And can they believe that you can do what they want? Because very often, um, people come in at the top and they want to bring somebody of their own. Everybody wants to build their own empire. And it takes a lot to survive an empire switch. So it behooves you even more to prove that value and thinking and showing that you are aligned and that you are. I mean, I spent almost 10 years working at Bloomberg, and they were a client of mine. I was a super vendor, for lack of a better word. I made it through over 10 years, three different heads of PR, three different heads of PR in that time. It might have been more at some point. It might have been, actually, you know what? It was four. For now that I'm thinking about it, and I gotta think of everybody's name, four. Okay. So at any point, any one of those people could have said, you know what? Especially because I wasn't not an employee, you know, there's the door. I'm bringing my own people or whatever. But you had to make sure that you've already proven enough value and you've communicated that. And not only you've communicated that, but your work speaks for itself, that you get the support that you can make it through a regime change, even if it's four of them. That's, you know, and I think that those are other, that's another way of looking at um, surviving, surviving in this profession. And, it's another form of showing value is you want your supporters.
You know,
Like you to jump in, and then Dad, you're going to close this out. So we're almost to the hour. So this has been good. I just want to kind of wrap it up here a little bit on a bow. I apologize, Julie.
oh no, that's okay. I was going to say, I really liked, Drew, what you were saying over around value and being aligned, because I think one of the most important skills any communications or marketing professional or business owner can have is to really is to listen. You have to understand what the client's real challenge is. And that applies to pretty much every situation, including and maybe most often in tough times. So if you're the leader of a company in tough times, or you're advising a company as a communications expert, I mean, you have to get inside the heads of each of their stakeholders. Their customer is also experiencing this tough time. What are they thinking about what you're telling them? Your employees are also worried about what's going on around them. What are you telling them? And so, you come into a new company, or there's a leadership regime change. What does that CEO do? He does not make false promises. Like Drew said, he goes on a listening, or she goes on a listening tour and finds out, what the real opportunities are, what the challenges are before they start talking. So I would just, my final thought is that listening and truly understanding is probably one of the biggest components to success in this area.
Agreed. Dad, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, Drew, you were talking about websites. It's interesting. One of my franchisees about 4 or 5 years ago has a friend, an acquaintance who teaches at the Harvard Business School, or at least claims that he does. And when he was first starting up, my franchisee, he let me know that this friend of his told him that our websites are failing us. They're not doing well. And he knows this because he teaches at the Harvard Business School. And I had this conversation with my franchisee. And I said, well, what does he think of our business model? And he said, well, you didn't really comment on that because you can't get a higher bounce rate than I have. I have the highest bounce rate of any company that didn't go bankrupt yet. But this professor of business didn't ask the right questions. When we started our company, my partner Andy and I, we had some theories, but they were only theories because no one had ever done what we're doing. No one had ever developed the style. And so initially, in our original mission statement, we had a comment that our website is designed specifically to support our radio marketing footprint. And what we found was people go to our front page and they leave right away. All the time, 99%. They go to our front page and they get the hell out of our website. Well, why do you think that is? Why do you guys think that is? Because they got the phone number. They got what they were looking for.
Oh.
Yeah, we have a robust website with all kinds of cool stuff in the background. If you want to get into gutterology 101, if you want to, we have all kinds of cool stuff on page 1 to 20. But honestly, 99% of our people, our clients and customers, they only want our phone number. And that's the only reason, that is the number one reason that our website exists. And we need to know that. You need to know your mission statement. You need to know who your target market is, and you need to tailor all of your marketing accordingly. There you have it.
I didn't know that about your bounce rate. Well, folks, I got to jump, but this was great. Dad, Julie, Drew, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Good to join you guys. Thank you all very much.
Take care. Be
All
well.
right, Des. We'll talk later.